house, this haunted house, and kills anybody who comes in, sucks the life out of them, kind of thing. And the character lead actress, I think it was Sarah Michelle Gellar, she goes out and she tries to investigate, where this girl came from, how she became that way that she is. And there was this ancient Japanese witchcraft practitioner who was pulling demons out of people and making her daughter swallow them. And so she was literally like a hotbed full of demons.
Yeah, and that's very possible. That type of thing could happen. Now, we go back to who are these demonic forces? Going back to the book of Enoch again, there's an interesting passage. The Watchers are essentially put on notice that they're going to be captured and put into Tartarus. They are going to be put into a different dimension. Remember, we live in a 10-dimensional world. They were evidently going to be put outside of these 10 dimensions or be bound somewhere where they could do no harm. Their request was to take their children with them. And the request was made to Enoch, and Enoch goes, okay, well, I'll go ask Yahweh. And Yahweh says, no. On the earth they were begotten, and on the earth they will stay. Now, it's interesting because Genesis, after the flood, Genesis, the 9th chapter, the 5th verse, Yahweh tells Moses that you can eat meat. He says, only you cannot eat the blood, because within the blood there is the soul, and the soul I am asking back from every living creature that dies. The soul of man I will ask back when he dies. So our soul is, or I should say our body is a host to our soul. What is our soul? Our soul is our consciousness and our life force. I'll explain that a little bit further, a little bit more later on. But, here we're dealing with these interdimensional life forms. And we've got a long history of alien interaction. Now we go back to the book of Daniel, and Daniel's praying to Yahweh. He says, tell me the future of what's going to happen with our people. And nothing's going, he's not getting an answer. Finally, the angel Gabriel shows up and he says, hey, sorry I'm late, but I was fighting the Prince of Persia, and he would not let me pass. So I had to go back and get Michael, the foremost one, the Archangel Michael, the foremost one of your people, and bring him to fight the Prince of Persia so I could deliver the message. So he delivers the message. He tells, no worry, they'll be repatriated back to the Holy Land. Everything will be cool. And so he says, well, I got to go and return to go fight the Prince of Persia. And he says, look, the Prince of Greece is coming. And so he goes back and he fights the Prince of Persia. Now, he's not actually fighting Xerxes. He's fighting a demonic, not actually a demonic spirit. Actually, he's fighting one of the angels of Satan, if you want to classify it that. He is fighting one of the rebel force which are responsible for kidnapping this planet. What's their purpose? We'll cover that in a minute. So he has to go back to fighting that, and now there's another one coming. Now, if he is fighting interdimensional life forms as himself, and he's got to be pretty important because he's the only angel that's mentioned by name in a standard Bible. Some Bibles will mention the angel Raphael, but Gabriel is the only one that's mentioned. Not only is he mentioned once, he's mentioned twice. He's mentioned again in the Christian Greek scriptures at the announcement of Jesus' conception. So he must be fairly important, pretty powerful, interdimensional. Well, and he needed help fighting the Prince of Persia. So now, if there was a Prince of Persia that was directing that world power, we would have to, and there was a Prince of Greece that was directing that world power, then we would have to believe that there was probably a prince, a high-ranking interdimensional life form directing all the world powers, pitting the people against each other, kind of like what Greek mythology tells us Zeus does with the mortals here on Earth. Just pit them against each other and see what happens. And so it's like one big chess game. Egypt goes up against Assyria, loses. Assyria goes up against Babylon, loses. Babylon goes, or the Medes and Persians come up against Babylon, Babylon loses. The Persians go up against Greece, Greece loses. Greece goes against Rome. Well, Rome just basically overtakes Greece. There wasn't much of a battle there. They share the same gods almost, which is interesting because now you get the story of Diana and Lucifer, the twin god and goddesses. And from there, the next world power is what? From Rome, it goes to Britain and the United States. The sun never sets on British soil you could almost still say that. The United States is still part of the colonies. You don't believe that? Spend 2 hours in London.
The sun never sets on Britannia's holdings, I believe is the quote.
You would know better than I. I thought I was independent for the last 200 years.
Well, maybe you misinterpreted the word independent as not being independence.
I've always been independent, regardless of what Her Majesty might think. I can cure her ills, too, with words, but that's besides the point.
What does majesty mean, and does the Queen actually qualify as being majestic?
Yes and no. In rank and title, which she does hold, even though she is illegitimate crowned heir to the throne, but in rank and title, she does hold certain ranks of privilege, ranks of rulership, and she bears these with the support of the Vatican, regardless of what anyone believes. All roads lead to Rome, still do. When we pay our taxes here, it goes to the Queen. When the Queen takes 40%, passes the rest on to the Vatican. So we know where the control's coming from. This is a whole. We may get time to get to that segment. I'm going to try to wrap things up a little bit more quickly here, seeing as we're in the 21st century, not in the Bible. So by title now. In the scriptures, we're told, okay, listen, you're to obey the laws of the government until they go against the laws of God, because the governments are allowed to rule by God's permission, by Yahweh's permission. So considering the way that society is, we do need to have rules and regulations for people to live by. Because if you remove the rules and regulations, what would you have? Mayhem. In today's world, sure you would have mayhem. You don't believe that? Remove all the rules and regulations, hand everybody a gun, and then get on the Long Island Expressway. That's the road that goes from New York City out to Long Island, which is known as a moving parking lot. Sooner or later, those people are going to get angry enough at each other, and if they can shoot each other and get away with it, no repercussions, there's going to be a lot of bullet-ridden cars lining that road.
Well, conveniently, New York has gun bans, except for the mafia and the police, who are incidentally working for the mafia.
Pretty much. So there you go, and it's a good thing too. The world, and not that I'm supporting gun bans, I'm supporting keeping guns out of the hands of criminals. I think that's a real good idea, but the problem is when you ban guns, the only ones who have guns are criminals. And
that's probably because the criminals pay off the criminals and government to take the guns off of law-abiding person, so that's a hell of a lot easier to be a criminal because you don't have the risk of being shot when you're robbing people or raping them or destroying their lives.
Pretty much. And, unfortunately, we live in a world where criminals are at the highest level. The last pope was accused of actually.
Don't you find that ironic? How the lowest lowlifes get the highest positions and live the high life.
Well, do you know anything about Kevin Annett? Or Kevin Annett?
I had him on the show once. Yeah. I've been trying to get him back on about since the thing came out about the Pope and what have you. Been trying to get him back on, but I presume he's ridiculously busy.
Well, and they're probably looking to lock him up. I don't think they can kill him without really causing a problem, but they're looking at locking him up. But for treason, I think it is. Of all things. But regardless, he exposed the involvement of the Queen and the Anglican Church, along with the Pope and the Catholic Church, in child abuse and missing children. There's actually, I believe it was 12 children taken from one of the indigenous tribes in Canada, from one of the First Nations, who were all made to kiss Elizabeth's feet. They loaded them on a van, took them away, and those kids were never seen again. And then you go into the religious schools that the Canadian indigenous people have had to put up with. And what you find is that if the stories are true, kids were basically tortured to death or just went missing. Now, what most people don't realize, every year, 500,000 kids go missing and are never found. Actually, about 750,000, about 750,000 are kidnapped every year. About 250,000 are recovered, but there's 500,000 which just vanish and they never find a trace. And when I say recovered, either dead or alive. But there's 500,000 that just vanish. Where do they go?
Oh, that's small fry by comparison to the entirety of the problem. There's an enormous pedophile ring running around. I think DynCorp even was busted human trafficking over 100,000 women and children. And I heard some insane figures like 400,000 kids a year in the United States go missing. Something like 100,000 in the UK. Yeah, it's big freaking business. Okay, if you've got $1 billion, and you're a pedophile, the world's your oyster.
Yeah, pretty much, you can get whatever you want. You can get whatever you want, and the corruption is at the highest level. Now, we can go down a bunch of rat holes here, but for your listeners, if you want to find out, there's actually a religion that's involved here. It's the Vril Society. It comes out of Nazi Germany. Now, we talked about all this stuff that was imported through Operation Paperclip, along with the Vril Society. They were into sacrificing children. Look that up, and Loosh, Loosh. Loosh is allegedly the captured soul of a sacrificed child, which is sold on the intergalactic black market. It's supposed to be the most strongest alien drug or drug available, and aliens or ETs are said to pay big money for it. Now, I don't know exactly what kind of cash they come up with, but it's the most valuable drug in the universe. Loosh. Look it up. I was told if you go down that rat hole, they will come after you. And interestingly enough, it was the nephew of a current Knights Templar that told me that. Don't go down that rat hole because they will come after you. So I said, yeah, you know what? I know what's going on. I'll report it. Good enough. Do your own research. And moved on. Why store up a hornet's nest? It's there. You know, okay, what do you want to do? You want to go look inside and see what all the buzz is about? You know, you just best move on there. Go find a different subject to go look down. And the problem is that there's so many of these hornet's nests around the world, and people get fixated on them instead of saying, yep, they're all there. What does it all mean? And now, when we go back and we look at what was going on before World War II, in order to get this picture, we actually have to go back to and have a little history lesson. It pretty much starts with around the War of 1812, interestingly enough. In 1811, the United States didn't renew the Rothschilds' charter for the First Bank of America. In 1812, we had ourselves a war. England didn't learn the first time, came back and invaded the United States. Why? Because Nathan Rothschild turned around and said, or Amschelmeyer Rothschild, one of them, said to the King of England. Now, they had, interestingly enough, that they were in the process. They were, at this time, they were financing both Wellington or the English army and Napoleon's army. And Napoleon's army was raging across Europe during this time. Now, the Rothschilds said, "We'll finance it. You send the troops." So England sent the troops and the war was on. He said, "Go recapture those colonies. We'll make them pay for it." They got their bank thrown out. Piggy bank was broken. Sorry, no more. The war ended in 1815, and in 1816, the Rothschilds had a charter bank, the Second Bank of America. Andrew Jackson, who had to fight the British during the War of 1812, threw the bank back out. And the bank didn't come back into America until 1913, when they blackmailed Woodrow Wilson and was reestablished as the Federal Reserve Bank of America. They are not part of the U.S. government. They are a privately held bank who the United States uses as their banker. And we owe them over close to $17 trillion now, so they ain't gonna never see that bill being paid anyway.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, I think that's the public debt clock, which doesn't take into account derivatives trading.
You want to go to derivatives now? We're talking, what is it, $220 trillion?
Oh no, that's nothing. It's like,
no, that's just
it's
the
like
U.S. share.
It's like $4,000 trillion, like quadrillions kind of thing.
Oh, that's right. It is up. It is $4 quadrillion. It's $4 quadrillion. I had read an article about it about 3 months ago, and I'm like, how in the world do they get that much debt?
It's funny because I was just guessing four quadrillion because I heard 2 quadrillion about 5 years ago, I think, or it might have been about 2008. Sorry. When New Zealand's new Prime Minister got elected, who incidentally was on the board of the Federal Reserve in New York for 2 years as the head of the bond and derivatives trade for Europe. And so the derivatives market crashes in 2008, and then he gets elected to get us out of the crisis that he helped cause.
Hey, maybe he learned something. How to cause it again.
Yeah,
because that maybe he could fix it. You see, so there's not so much irony in that as you might think. But
actually, you know what he figured out? He figured out that if you buy shares in all the companies that are going to make a hell of a lot of money for all the debt that you create and put them in a blind trust, you can be the prime minister of a country, dictate its policy, and make a hell of a lot of money without people knowing about it.
Yeah, just by holding the debt. And you know, it turns into basically the ultimate high stakes poker game, where they're now, you know, it's like remember when you were, I don't know, I remember doing this when I was a kid. I'll bet you $1, I'll bet you $100, I'll bet you $1,000, I'll bet you $1 quadrillion, I'll bet you a zillion, bazillion, quadrillion, as high as you could count dollars. Yeah, and it's going on in reality. Yeah, I don't know. Did you ever do that when you were a kid? You get into a betting contest with one of your friends just to see who could bet the most imaginary money?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's exactly what's going on in the world right now. It's a bunch of grown-up kids betting with a bunch of imaginary money, all based on debt, to the point where they own the world so many times over that if the system collapsed, there's no way that they could ever get paid back.
You know, this reminds me of an argument Homer Simpson had with Mr. Flanders. Freight not times infinity. Freight so times infinity plus 1. Don't!
You know, it's like, where do you want to take it? Where do you want to take it?
Well, we're just making stuff up, you know. I mean, in fact, that's kind of become.
We're simplifying the obvious, which is so complicated that the government can't regulate it. And when you listen to any of the analysts,
the government can regulate anything that's complicated just by messing it up.
Well, you see. When you get, from what I understand, now I'm not an expert in the equities market. I mean, in the equities market, and you know, I'm not a banker. Sorry, scientist, researcher, biblical historian, exopolitical ambassador to Earth, but can't tell you a whole lot about money. I can tell you that I don't have a whole lot of it, but that's besides the point. But they've created this debt system, which is all based on artificial money, which is just numbers in somebody's computer. I mean, you're talking at a level, and the analysts that look at this say that you're better off taking the money that they have invested in this system and going to Las Vegas and betting it on a blackjack table. Think about it.
Well,
you would have a better return at a legal gambling establishment.
Incidentally, when the Glass-Steagall Act was implemented, it was after the 1920 stock market crash, which caused the Great Depression, and that great stock market crash was caused by derivatives trading. You put $1 down and you get $10 worth of stock, kind of thing. Is this?